Do you struggle with your chipping? Well, if you do, this could be the video for you. We're down here at Sandyway Golf Club in Cheshire with Golf Monthly's top 50 golf coach, Ged Walters, and he's going to be taking you through 6 common mistakes amateurs do around the green when it comes to chipping. Right, save me talking, let's get into it. Over to you, Ged.
Thanks, Monty. So there's no better place to start than with the biggest issue, the number one issue. Poor setup leads to everything. What is the most common setup that I see? Well, I see people setting up as if they've got the 7-iron in hand. So they're doing this, and they are literally 3 feet away from the green. Now, if you're like this, and then all of a sudden you're trying to hit a shot which is going about 25, 30 feet, we see, and then it's a big slowdown. So we try and help the ball up into the air, not hit it too far, and that leads to hitting the ground too soon. It leads to hitting the middle of the golf ball and thinning it across the green. It leads to topping it, and a lot of frustration more than anything else. So how do we get the right setup? Well, your setup for, let's start with this sort of basic shot. Just on a lovely lie here. The keys that we want to get is we don't want to go too wide. So we want to narrow the width of the stance down. So if I was to put my club head in between my feet there, you can see it's only ever so slightly wider than the width of my golf club. Now, I don't want to be miles away from the golf ball as well. I want to be a little bit closer than normal. So from here, there is very little space between me and the golf club. If I was to just change to here, that's about the distance you would want to be. So we want our golf ball for this as a generalized shot being generally more central in the stance, because that's just going to help you with your angle of attack then moving down. From this position here, you are in a much better place to be able to move the club nicely, more importantly, be able to move the torso and allow the body's rotation to support the release of the club. One which I see loads all the time is a loss of structure in the arms. So you can see here, I have a little ball just dangling from my neck here on a little lanyard. You don't have to use one of these, you could use a deflated football, you could use a swimming armband. But what this is for is to maintain a little bit more of the structure of the arms. If we think about when we were taking our setup position, if I was just to pinch this between my forearms here, from here you can see that the structure between my shoulders and my arms is more like a triangle. So if we then take that down into the golf club itself, it's almost like creating the letter Y. Now, what I see loads of is a struggle from golfers who want to try and get the golf ball up in the air. They lose that letter Y, and it comes from the separation of the elbows as they try and help the ball into the air. Now, the release of the club, so this movement in the wrists is an essential movement to really control. We want to have that, we don't want to take that out of the way, but what we do want to stop is this shortening of the radius. So if we think about the club being sat on the ground, as soon as I separate my elbows, the club comes away from the ground, so that's shortening the radius. Well, if I now move on to the golf ball, well, I've got no chance of hitting the golf ball there. The club isn't going to collect the ball on its way through, so I'm going to do one of 3 things. I see we stick the club into the ground too soon because we then start leaning back, we thin the ball across the other side of the green, or we just catch it right on the top. So controlling the structure is really, really important. So if I keep the forearms pinched together so they're maintaining the ball in place, all I have to do then is just maintain the height of my posture and then keep the club moving, and I can brush the ground. And as long as I keep doing that, I'm going to brush the ground all the time. So then the club is going to collect the golf ball on its way through. So if I was then to address the golf ball, all I'm thinking about is maintaining the Y, maintaining the structure of the arms and keeping my movement. And I'm going to make really nice contact all the time. So the length and speed is going to then control the distance. Another common mistake is a lack of movement in the upper body. There's a lot of players who just try and use their hands and arms and forget that the real sort of engine of the motion is about turning the torso. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you see a lot of chipping actions, we see a lot of this. So when you look at it from face on, you see that my chest is still facing the golf ball. So it's a lot of this kind of action. Now what happens, I see a lot from there, is when we see that lack of motion, the club moves quite a bit and then it starts to slow down and the speed of the arms tries to control the shot, and then lots of that happens. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this bit moves. The chest has got to start moving, and it's got to have that motion where the arms then follow, and it's the chest supporting the release of the club head as we go through. Now, as long as we get that happening, we'll be able to allow the golf club to almost land on the turf, glide along the turf, and then take off. Almost, if you imagined an aeroplane landing on the runway, so it would come down, it would touch down wheels, it would then move along the runway. And then imagine it wanted to sort of take off again, it would then move up. So we're releasing the golf club, but we're supporting this release with the turn that we're going to make. So now when I make a backswing and I rotate the torso, I can allow the club to land on the ground. The sole is going to do most of the work, so it'll just bruise the turf as we go through. And then even if I was to get the club to land, say here, an inch, inch and a half behind the golf ball, because of the way I'm using the club and the body, the club is actually going to still move along the ground. It's going to be like the plane still going along the runway. So I'm not going to get that duffed shot. I'm actually still going to get a really good outcome. So on this shot, I'm now going to support that release with the rotation, and we're just going to allow the club then to bruise the ground. And then you can see it just pops up nicely off towards the target. Another one of the big mistakes that I see from lots of people when they're chipping is they move the club inside very, very early. Plenty of golfers are moving the club in and around here very, very early. So the only thing they can either do from there is try and come back this way, and the body's then got to start working away to keep the club away from the ground, because it would just stick into the floor back here too far away. So this leads into a lot of pushed shots, a lot of shanks and stuff like that. Or they then try and loop over the top. Now, sometimes you can get away with it, but there's a lot of timing involved, and when there's timing involved, sometimes it stays with you for a bit, but when it disappears, you just don't know when it's going to come back. So if we think about what's going to happen if we move the club on a more natural plane, as the club moves away from the golf ball, if you thought about it moving in a straight line, it would be moving straight back, but the more it moves off the ground, it arcs. So it's moving back, it's moving up, and it's moving in. But it's not moving too far in. So you can see the club's relationship to the shaft, the stick that I've got there just on the angle, just to match the shaft's plane. So it's moving back, up and in. Then from here, you can rotate back through, and the club will come back down and through to execute your shot. So having that picture in your mind of the club moving back and up and in, and even practicing with a shaft or an alignment stick in the ground like we have here, a shaft or alignment stick on the ground, so you've got a visual of the direction that you're moving the golf club in. That's the important thing. So from that point of view there, you'd be able to practice and hit shots like this, just taking your setup, just picturing that back, up and in motion, and making a nice, smooth, controlled swing. Another of the big common mistakes that we see is when players try and steer the ball towards their target. So what I mean by that is when they swing the club through the impact, what they're trying to do is move the club in the direction that they want the golf ball to go in. When we look at how we want to move, when we're moving around the arc, as you can see there, as I move the club around the arc, it's moving up that exit route stick there to the left. Now, if I try to move it in the direction that I would want the golf ball, what we would see then is I'm pushing my arms and the club away from the golf ball, which is where a lot of you guys will hit the shanks from. So I'm just going to play a little shot here now where you can see that as long as I make the right movement, we've got golf ball exiting up the stick towards the target, and I've kept moving around so the club has exited round to the left. Finally, one thing that I see way too much is people just picking up their most lofted club. So I've got 4 clubs in my hands here. I've got my most lofted club, 58 degree. The amount of time I see people just going in for their 58, their 60, wanting to hit it up in the air, it's get rid of that. 54, that's plenty of loft. Now, behind me where the bunker is, if I was in that situation, people would still want to go for their most lofted. 54 degrees is a lot of loft. So the ball will get up in the air. You don't really need to go too severe, as I say, unless it's a real sort of challenging lie, downslope situation, something like that. So again, 54 degree from this situation, that can go over there as well. There are 2 options really that I would want to see most golfers use that would lower their scores. It's all about lower scores. It's not about hitting a sexy shot, it's about the lower score. The putter and a 7-iron, they're the keys. The reason is we've got loads of green to work with. Now, the 7-iron will help you get over this little bit of grass here and get the ball running nicely. The putter will just run through because this is cut really nice and short. So it's one of the 2 options, whichever you feel really more comfortable with. But I like to see the ball on the ground as quickly as possible because it's 1, more predictable, and 2, it's telling you what the green's going to do. So if you leave it short, you're getting a look of how the ball is going to move down towards the hole. If the ball goes beyond the hole, please pay attention to it because it is reading the putt that you're about to hit for you. If you watch how that ball moves, you are then going to see how the ball is going to be expected to come back towards you. So from here, if I just put the putter down for a second, and in terms of playing this 7-iron shot, I want you to play it just like you would play a putt, but with a narrower stance, nice and tall, and just moving back and through, nice and smooth, keeping the triangle of the arms in place, keeping the shoulders rocking back and through. You just want to nudge the ball and let it run. That's all you want to do. If you want to use your normal grip, if you want to use your putter grip, that's entirely up to you. It's personal preference, but just making sure that your feet are nice and close together. So it's only about the width of the club head there. Little bit of pressure, just leaning into the left side so that you've got an ever so slight downward angle of attack, and we're just going to put a little bit of a putting stroke on it and just roll it forward, and you can just see how that ball is reading the green for me. So it's moved in from right to left, and now I've left myself, I don't know, what's that, 3.5 feet maybe for my next shot, which is just all you want to do. You want to keep it as simple as possible so the next shot is very, very easy.
Thanks, Jed. Lots of great information there for you guys to take away and implement into your own game. I hope you found it useful. I definitely have. But that's it from us here at Sandy Way Golf Club in Cheshire. See you next time.